Welcome into another edition of MPW Digital Extra presented by Rustic Revivals. I'm Neil McCready. Today on the show, three really good guests. Think you'll enjoy the show completely. I told you about a week ago that we were interested in Chris Lowe's story about the growth and maturation of Lane Kiffin. He was in Oxford right before the season opener, Ole Miss against Furman. Had a big story about Kiffin. I've known Chris for more than 2 decades now. I got Chris on with me early this week. We talked about that story. We talked about Lane, about the growth that he's experienced over the course of his career. Talked about the Ole Miss program. Mentioned all the rumors about Auburn 2 years ago, some of the rumors that are already popping up now about Florida. Got his perspective on where Lane Kiffin is in terms of his tenure at Ole Miss, his happiness in Oxford, all of those things. I think you'll really enjoy that conversation with Chris Lowe, the national college football writer for ESPN. Ole Miss defeated Furman last week, 76-0. Up next, it's Middle Tennessee, 3:15 on Saturday in Oxford, Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. The game on SEC Network. I talked to Jake Bolden, who covers the Blue Raiders for GoMiddle.com. It's part of the Rivals Network. Those guys have been terrific to work with this week, throughout the week, both written coverage at Rivals.com with RebelGrove.com and also here on MPW Digital. So you'll hear from Jake. Really good interview with him as well. And then Ben Mintz, Barstool Sports, has some breaking news for you. And then also we talk college football betting lines for the week and also go through week 1 of the NFL season. If you're watching this on Thursday, Chiefs entertain the Ravens tonight to open the NFL season. Got a game in Brazil on Friday, full slate of Sunday games, a Monday night game. The NFL season has arrived. So we talk NFL, go through week 1 with Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. So we'll get to all of that here in just a minute. I want to tell you that MPW Digital Extra is presented by Rustic Revivals. Based out of Flowood, Mississippi, Rustic Revivals builds tables and other furniture by hand with locally sourced lumber. The husband and wife team of Josh and Ashley Pierce specialize in custom-ordered tables, beds, dressers, coffee tables, bookshelves, decorative cabinets, chairs, and much more. They also have a limited selection of ready-for-pickup pieces available in their shop. Rustic Revivals delivers within 250 miles of Flowood, Mississippi, and all pieces are sealed for protection. Podcast listeners can take 10% off their purchase by using the code REBELS10. That's REBELS10. The QR code, you can see it right here on the stream, is right there for you as well. You can also just go to rusticrevivalsms.com. You can go to Facebook and go to Rustic Revivals MS. On Instagram, you can go to Rustic Revivals. Check out all of their beautiful work. They're coming up here at some point in the fall. Might do some work here in the MPW Digital Studios. We'll chronicle that when that happens as well, so you guys can see all the fantastic work that Josh and Ashley do there at Rustic Revivals. You can also call them directly, 228-217-1243, or you can email rusticrevivals@gmail.com. Chris Lowe, Jake Bolden, Ben Mintz all join on the Campbell Clinic hotline. From fractures and sports injuries to complex spine and limb conditions, the pediatric orthopedic physicians at Campbell Clinic in Oxford are the only specialized orthopedic team in North Mississippi providing expert care for growing bodies. So visit campbellclinicoxford.com to schedule an appointment or call 901-759-3111. I'm in the Clark Ford Studios, 662-257-1900 is that number. Call, ask Corey and the people at Clark Ford for a quote. You'll get one. The rest is up to you. You can shop it around. You can do what I've done, what I recommend that you do, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today, 662-257-1900. And before we get to Chris Lowe and that interview about Lane Kiffin, I have to ask you, have you had Wendy's nugs covered in sauce? Because if you haven't, you should. Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, prepare to nug like you've never nugged before for a whole new way to nug. It's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. And now to the Campbell Clinic hotline and Chris Lowe. of ESPN. My longtime friend Chris Lowe, ESPN, joins. Chris and I go way back when he was covering Tennessee for the Tennessean. I was covering Auburn for the Mobile Register. We were all part of kind of a big quote swap. Chris made it all the way to ESPN. I did not make it all the way to ESPN, but we've stayed buddies nonetheless. Chris, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
I don't know if I made it anywhere, Neil. I've just made it in the business where I'm almost 60 years old, still working. That's where I've made it to. So, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I think at some point, just this longevity is an accomplishment. You were in Oxford. You go kind of way back with Lane Kiffin. I think you've known Lane since certainly his time as Tennessee's head coach, which seems like a long time ago. But you spent some time in Oxford. I saw you when you were here. You had a story in ESPN. I guess it was kind of a kickoff story, big Lane Kiffin story late last week before week one got rolling. It was, first of all, a very well-written story, very, very insightful. I'm curious, and we'll dive into it a little bit, but just your overall takeaways of the growth and maturation of Lane Kiffin since he got to Oxford in, December of 2019.
Lane is good subject matter, and you know that. I mean, I don't care who's writing the story. And when you do know him, and I have known Lane for, over 15 years now, it makes it easier. But no, he is different. I mean, he really is. I mean, people have said that and they've questioned it, but he's certainly a different guy that I knew from the 33-year-old Lane Kiffin that was at Tennessee in 2009. And you probably could say about a lot of us, I'm different than I was when I was 30-something. And I certainly wasn't coaching football. I mean, guys, think about it. He was 31 when he was with the Raiders. I just can't fathom that, Neil. But I think he's, as he said in the story, he's much more at peace in his life. He's sober. He's not drinking. He's got his daughter Landry here. Knox, his son, is there in Oxford a ton. His dad's passing was tough. I mean, he was really close. He shared a deep connection with Monty, and I think he's really tried to process that and what he's trying to do to honor his dad. What he wants to do is, he wants to try to be more like his dad and be the kind of guy that's, giving, give more than you take. And the thing he repeated to me multiple times when I was there is that his dad was always one of those people who cared about people that not a lot of the people did. And I think that's reverberated throughout Lane's mind over and over again since his dad passed. So he's still Lane, and he's always going to be Lane. He's always going to be an antagonist. He's always going to have that dry, sharp, cutting wit. He's always going to be one of those guys who doesn't care, how many toes he steps on or if he's a little bit too much on Twitter. It's just the way he is. That's sort of the way he's always been. But I do think he's more grounded in who he is as a dad, as a coach, as a friend, as a colleague. And he is genuinely fulfilled in what he's doing right now. And I think that's very apparent to me as I've been around him for a long time. And he said, man, I spent so much of my life in this profession thinking about the next job or how much money I can make or, are we going to win X amount of championships or are they going to build a statue for me at this particular place? And that just, he seems to have really grown from that. And he's taken a really introspective look, Neil, at himself, at his life, where he is. He's pushing 50 now. Hard to believe. And, having Chris, his brother, and his family in town, I know is really heartening to Lane. So having his family around has been a big deal there in Oxford. And I think, he's not afraid to say it. He thinks he's got a really good, talented football team.
So you get an opportunity over the years, in large part because these people trust you so much as a reporter, as a person. You get a lot of behind-the-scenes looks at programs that are really successful. Like you spent a lot of time around the Alabama program during Nick Saban's tenure there. You've kind of been all over the place. You were in Oxford. You got kind of a behind the scenes look a little bit inside the building. I know you got to talk to some people other than Lane, just in terms of the atmosphere around that program from your, I guess, sort of 30,000-foot view, maybe a little closer than that, but you're not there every day is my point. How much did it at all remind you of maybe some of the environments of like in Tuscaloosa when Saban was there, that kind of thing? Obviously Kiffin's taken a lot from Pete Carroll. He's taken a lot from Nick Saban. He's tried to kind of build a different environment in Oxford than what was there previously. It's been an ongoing thing. I'm just kind of curious what your thought of the program itself was from your time there.
No, you're exactly right. He's done his best to take a lot away from when he was with Pete, and a lot away from when he was with Nick, and just sort of mix it. Words I would use would be motivated, focused, loose, unpredictable. I mean, some days they end meetings playing 2-on-2 basketball in the meeting room. I'm talking about full contact 2-on-2 basketball, which is pretty fun. But they work. I mean, they get after it, practice field. I mean, again, they've got more depth, Neil, than they've had. I think they can do that to a greater degree than they could in the past. That was something that jumped out to me. They look different, bigger and physical, and there's competition. The best teams, and it's no secret, Ohio State and Bama and Georgia and teams like that who've won, Clemson back when Dabo had it going. The secret sauce was competition on the practice field. I mean, guys that were the twos went after the ones, and I can tell you, in watching them practice the other day, that's what stuck out to me is their twos were hard to tell from their ones, especially the defensive line and receiver. Bringing a guy like Trey Amos, I can't tell you how key it was to bring in that. He would have been a starter at Alabama this year.
Yeah,
you play a couple of positions. Watching him play, watching how he makes a difference in that secondary. So that's the thing, there's a lot of really good, healthy competition, and they get after each other. They push each other, and are not afraid to. And I mean this in a good way. Not afraid to go after each other. If someone's not upholding their end of the bargain, if someone's practicing poorly, if someone's sort of moping around, you're going to have guys get on them. Veterans, guys, the Jackson Darts of the world. Jackson's become a much, much more demonstrative leader. He's not afraid to speak up. And I think Lane is the kind of coach who empowers his guys, the players, to lead the football team.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Lane's changed a lot in 5 years. I think when Lane got to Ole Miss in 19, I don't think he thought he would be there very long. I think there was almost an arrogance to that, like, hey, I'm going to win. I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm going to win. I'm going to win big. I'm going to get out of here. I'll go land the big job. And then in 2022, the big job kind of came calling in Auburn, and he ultimately didn't take it. I know you and I communicated a lot during that. I communicated with other people. You were very on top of it. I think both of us thought, I don't know what to put words in your mouth, so feel free to correct me, but I think both of us thought like a week out when Ole Miss was playing at Arkansas that Saturday before the Egg Bowl, a week before the Iron Bowl, as Auburn was winding down that coaching search, I think both of us kind of thought Lane Kiffin was leaving Ole Miss for Auburn. He ultimately didn't. In your opinion, why didn't that happen?
I think Lane thought he was leaving for Auburn at that point, Neil. It was very close. And I think there are a lot of factors, none more important than his daughter Landry. Remember, she moved there in high school. When she was in high school, when she moved to Oxford. And,
yeah, right.
I actually talked
right before her senior year.
Yeah, I actually talked to Landry for the story, and she did not want her dad to go. She made it very clear to her dad and told him, listen, you left once before for a job. Really, you're going to leave again now that I'm here? And I think any dad, when you hear that, that's a tough pill to swallow. But listen, let's give Ole Miss some credit too. Keith Carter and administration stepped up financially, and were ready to pay him a ton of money, and did pay him a ton of money. He's making $9 million. I mean, you've been around that school forever. When did you ever think you see Ole Miss paying their football coach $9 million a year?
I didn't, honestly. It was interesting when all the Auburn stuff was unfolding. My thing with Auburn all along was I didn't think Lane was a great fit for Auburn. As you know, I covered Auburn for 6 years as a beat writer, essentially covered them for 10 years as a columnist or beat writer. I was around that program a lot. I didn't think it was a great fit for Lane, but I thought there was a real chance Lane would be held hostage to the outside perception of which is a better job. And over the course of 50 years, 75 years, the Auburn job's a better job than Ole Miss, period. I'm not positive that it is today in this new era of NIL and where I think it's all about fit and that kind of thing. I think Lane and Ole Miss fit really, really well. And NIL has changed the game. The transfer portal has obviously changed the game. But no, I never thought that Ole Miss would get to a place where they would pay $9 million to a coach and that the commitment would be where it is today. I just, there was no, and I don't really fault myself for that because there wasn't a lot of evidence that was something that could happen.
Yeah, and I think history, a lot of times with coaches, history is what makes their decision for them in these moments, Neil. When you look at Auburn from 1,000 feet away, it's always been a place where the boosters and donors, there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I say that probably about a lot of schools. But in the last 13, 14 years, Auburn has shown that it can win at the absolute highest level. Ole Miss hasn't done that.
Yeah.
Auburn won a national title in 2010. They played for one in 2013. They were right on the cusp of being in the BCS national championship game in 2017 when they played the SEC title after they beat Georgia, Bama back to back. They lost to Georgia in the rematch. If they won that game, they would have been in the BCS championship game. So that's I should say the playoff at that point. So that's 3 times in the last, 13, 14 years that they've been right there to play for it all or won it all. And I think that has had a big impact, on not just Lane, but all coaches.
Yeah.
And I think let's give Walker Jones and the collective credit too, because Lane had real questions whether the collective could grow enough there, whether it could be aggressive enough to match up with Auburn and some of the other schools in the SEC. And maybe that was the impetus, but they have grown. They have dived into the deep end with some of the big boys in NIL. And I think that was another thing in talking to Lane that really sort of opened his eyes. You know what? These guys are serious. We're going to be able to go out and bring in great players, and nobody has capitalized in that transfer portal or in the transfer portal era more than Lane has. So there are factors, and again, I give Ole Miss credit. I give Keith and administration, Walker Jones, everybody involved, but I do think at the end of the day, had Landry not come to him and said that, or she had been, Dad, hey, listen, if you want to go to Auburn, we're good with it. I don't know, but just based on my conversations, I think he probably would have gone.
So here we are a couple of years later. This is a completely rebuilt roster. As you said, nobody has done a better job. I'm sure some programs have done as good of a job in the transfer portal as Ole Miss, but I don't know that anybody's done a better job in the transfer portal than Ole Miss. You really saw it on Saturday night. Look, it was Furman. You can't take a whole lot from these games against FCS foes. In my opinion, you might disagree, but the mismatches are so extreme that at some point you just sort of tune out and wait for another test. But the one thing you can look at Ole Miss, like you said, on the practice field, they've got elite defensive linemen now, more than one or two. It's a very good unit. They're pretty solid in the secondary. They've got playmakers back there. Jackson Dart's a third-year quarterback. Trey Harris, Juice Wells, 2 really capable tight ends in Prescorn and Wright. They're bigger up front on their offensive line. We'll find out if they're better. Running back's a question, but it's not some glaring void or something. They have people who can play the position. You've been around this a lot. I asked Lane this. That's a long-winded question, Chris. I asked Lane this weeks ago because he was talking about this being the most talented roster he's had at Ole Miss. And I said, well, you were at USC when you had a dominant program with Pete. You were at Alabama, obviously, for some seasons there where Saban really had it completely rolling. They were the dominant force in college football. How much does this roster remind you of those? And I thought he gave a really thoughtful answer, which was, I don't know that you'll ever see those rosters again in this era of college football, but at the top level, it's reminiscent. Those kinds of playmakers, not as deep, but those kinds of playmakers. We're 1 week in, 2 weeks in, I guess, into the season. Does Ole Miss look like a title contender to you? I mean, I know Georgia and Ohio State are the best two teams in the country, but when you look at Ole Miss, do you see, hey, this is a team that's going to be in the mix, or do you see flaws?
Well, I disagree with Lane on the one thing there. I think you do see that at Georgia. I mean, I had a scout tell me this week that they were just there, and they've got 3 guys in the offensive line deal that don't play that would play anywhere else. Defensive front 7. They're not great at receiver, but that Georgia team in the line of scrimmage is, and they may lose. I mean, they got to play at Ole Miss, at Texas, at Alabama. But their talent level is to me what some of those teams you just discussed, at least close to it. And they got a first-round quarterback, in Beck. But Ole Miss, I think, this is the best way I would explain it. They're as equipped as they've been in my lifetime. And I know Hugh had some of those teams with his great receivers. Houston had some good teams to be a team that's playing for a title. I don't think they got the best roster in college football, but they certainly are much closer to being there. And you know what? There's so many variables that go into it. You got to be lucky. You got to stay healthy. And I'm talking to Spurrier about this. Their schedule has so much to do with it.
Yeah.
And their schedule, I think outside of Missouri, Ole Miss's schedule is as easy as there is in the SEC. I shouldn't say easy because probably easy and the SEC don't go together.
But it's favorable.
Let's say manageable. Let's say manageable. And I think that's got a lot to do with it. So I would be, again, if no one gets hurt, I would be surprised if Ole Miss is not in the playoff. Will they win the SEC? I mean, they could. I wouldn't pick them to win it right now. But I do think they'll be a team come late October, early November that's right there in the running. We'll see how it shakes out from there. And to me, we're in a new world in college football. You don't have to be perfect anymore. You don't have to go unbeaten or win your league to have a shot. Now, it helps because you're going to get a bye if you win a conference championship. But I think that too is a reason for a lot of the optimism is, you had no margin for error at Ole Miss or anywhere for the last couple of years. I mean, I always thought a Georgia or Alabama might have get a little bit of benefit of the doubt, which they have. But at Ole Miss or Missouri or, those types of schools, you were going to have to be just darn near perfect. And I don't know how realistic that was. But, no, I like Ole Miss's team. I like the fact that Lane is a coach who's always going to play to win. It's like he told me in the article. Nothing changes. Yeah, they're ranked 6. Everybody expects them to be in the playoff. You think, Neil, he's going to pucker up all of a sudden in a big game? No. He's going to go for it on 4th down inside his own territory. He's going to do some things, have some plays, run stuff that no one sees him running at a time when no one sees him running. That's just sort of who he is as a coach, and that's never going to change. So I like the fact that he is who he is with the combination of this talent. They're going to be a fun team to watch play. They really are on both sides of the ball. I think Pete Golding coming over is another big addition. Here's what to me tells me, and I already knew this about Lane, how secure he is in his own skin. Look at the guys he's brought in as analysts. I mean, Joe Judge, coached in the NFL with the Giants. Zach Arnett, head coach in the SEC. On and on and on. Guys that, William Vallejos, who's been all over the place, played at Alabama, was an all SEC center. I mean, you walk around that building, he brings in his brother, Chris Kiffin. He's got tons of guys who've coached in the NFL, who've been head coaches before, who've been in different programs, because he's constantly trying to glean information, new ways of doing things, trying to figure out how to sort of mix it all together and get that formula with the way he wants to do it, where they can win big games. The one thing he hasn't done in his career is he hasn't won a lot of the biggest games. Now, he's been at Florida Atlantic. He's at Ole Miss. He was at SC. He was at Tennessee that year for 1 year when they played. I think Bama was ranked number one. So you could say he hasn't had a Rolls Royce that he's been driving his entire career. USC certainly was. But that's where I think if you want to scrutinize Lane and his record on the field, that's where I think this year he's got a chance really for certainly the first time since he was at SC. And he's in a better place in his life right now, Neil, than he was at SC. But he's got a team. I think they got the makeup. He's equipped personally in all those areas that I think this is their best chance to beat the best teams on their roster.
The other big takeaway from your story in ESPN that was very enlightening, it's something we kind of heard a little bit here and there over the last couple of years, but it was the first time that someone sort of wrote it as forcefully as you did. And you obviously didn't write that without Lane telling you that, hey, this is what's happening. Was that his son, Knox, who's I guess a high school freshman right now, is planning to move to Oxford in a year. That would tell you that along with Landry still presumably being, I guess, a junior at Ole Miss at that time, that he's at least considering strongly the idea of this being a very long-term stay. This is year 5, but, where he could stay 8, 10 years. Curious just kind of did you take that away when he mentioned that about Knox as well?
Well, I think he's certainly planned it to be that way. I don't think he's looking like, all right, where's my next stop? Maybe he would have 4 years ago or 5 years ago, but I don't think that's the case right now. As he said, he was very clear. He said, I'm very fulfilled. I'm very happy. I'm at peace being here. The people there have treated him great, he said. As I mentioned before, the support he's gotten, from the collective, from the administration. They've really left him alone. They let him do what he wanted to do, or what he wants to do as a head coach. But Lane is a savvy guy. He's smart. He's never going to back himself into a corner and say, "I'm never ever leaving. This is my last job." I remember when Nick Saban told me after he'd been at Alabama for a couple of years, Texas came after him, and he listened. But at the end of the day, I don't think his wife wanted to go. He didn't want to go start over. He put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into getting Alabama to that place. And he just said, this is my last horizon in coaching. Lane hasn't said that. I don't think you're going to hear him say that. And to me, actions speak a lot louder than words anyway. Like you're talking about Knox moving. That's it. He's never going to close the book. I don't think any of us do on what comes open, because you never know what's going to happen. What's going to happen as the season goes on, what jobs are going to come open. I do think if Norvell had gone to Alabama last year, he would have thought long and hard about that Florida State job. In fact, I think he was their top target there in Tallahassee. And everyone there's going to wonder if Billy Napier doesn't make it to Florida. And boy, it certainly looks right now like he won't make it. Would Lane listen to Florida? I think he would. Who would? Who would not listen? Would he 1,000% go? He hasn't really. We haven't really talked about that, and I don't think he's wiser and savvy enough that he knows right now his priority is getting that Ole Miss football team to the playoff and making a run, because he really believes down deep they've got the team to do it. And I don't think any talk about Florida or what else might be out there is going to distract him. And that's probably another area, Neil, where he's grown up a lot and matured. And again, I don't think it's just him. I think a lot of us. So no, just in my conversations with him, Florida doesn't come up, other jobs don't come up, but I also know him well enough. And I know most coaches, as you've covered ball for a long time, they just don't ever completely shut the door on other jobs. That doesn't mean he's not happy. That doesn't mean that he doesn't plan right now to be there for a long, long time and have his family be there with him. But I don't think that also means that he's signed some secret proclamation or secret document that's written in blood that he's going to be there forever. So we'll see. I just
totally
think he's so excited. He's so excited and so pumped about where he is in his life right now, what's happened there inside that program, what the university has done, the commitment they made, and the roster he's assembled. And I think that's front and center on his mind right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, you know him a lot better than I do. It's pretty obvious that he's happy where he is, but I'm happy where I am. You're happy where you are. Doesn't mean you wouldn't listen to somebody if they came calling, because you do. You listen. You're almost foolish if you don't. I do think it's going to be an interesting storyline, probably for Lane Kiffin, probably for Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri, that the Florida thing, unless Billy can turn it around pretty quick, and Chris Saturday did not look like they're very close to a turnaround.
No, and there are other factors too. I mean, what's going to happen? The AD there, Scott Strickland. Is he in trouble? If this thing just falls apart, and I'm certainly not wishing ill of Scott. I've known Scott a long time, but does he make it as AD? Would they want him, Neil, to hire the next head football coach? I don't know where Scott would be with Lane. I know in the past he's had, his reservations about Lane. So would he be the one doing it, or do they bring in a new AD? And who do they bring in as AD? So man, there's so many unknowns when it comes to coach searches and who's going to make it, who doesn't, who's the candidate, who's not. So I don't know, man. We'll have a better feel come 1st of November. But boy, Florida's got to improve a lot against a killer schedule. The worst schedule I've seen in all my years of covering college football.
Brutal.
The worst.
Yeah. All right. Some just quick thoughts, just real quick. I'm going to keep you 3 more minutes. Just quick thoughts. You were just in Tuscaloosa. You were at Alabama's opener. You were around Kalen DeBoer, who wins everywhere he's ever gone, has put together one hell of a coaching staff. What were your just overall impressions on Bama?
Yeah, a lot of different feel in that building. A lot of confidence, but looseness that I haven't really noticed in that program. Now, listen, Nick Saban was as good as we'll ever probably see. There's different ways to do it, but this team is confident and loose, and really Neil pissed off the way last season ended, and pissed off that there's that narrative out there. Well, Saban's gone. Alabama's best days are behind him. If you're a player, and let's not forget the kind of alpha males that Bama brings on campus. If you're a player, I mean, that sticks with you. Well, it was all Saban. We had nothing to do with it. So that's the feel I got. And they've got a coach in DeBoer who's secure enough in his own skin that he's going to do it his way. He's respectful of the way Nick Saban did it, but he's going to be who he is. He's not going to try to be anybody different. And here's the other thing I would say about him. They sort of said this about Heupel when Heupel came to Tennessee. Well, can he recruit in the SEC? Can he bring in players that you got to win at this level? You look at the early returns on Alabama's recruiting, and I give DeBoer credit. He assembled a recruiting staff with Courtney Morgan and a lot of those guys. He kept Bob Welton, who was there under Saban. They're recruiting very well right now, very, very well. So you still got to have players. Saban understood that as well as anybody. DeBoer does. I just think his style, the way he goes about recruiting and bringing in guys, is so much different. Probably still going to take a lot of getting used to for fans and some other people around that program. But they've got a good team. I don't think they are elite at some of the positions Bama was under Saban, like pass rushers, edge guys. They got a lot of new faces in the secondary, especially corner. Although Keon Sabb, again, just like Trey Amos there at Alabama in the transfer portal, you've got to be able to go out and get at least 4 or 5 of those guys every year. And I think Sabb from Michigan at safety paired with Malachi Moore gives them one of the better safety duos in college football. And they got a quarterback who's played a lot of football in Jalen Milroe, and it's dynamic. And I'll be eager to see how he grows in that system against better competition. Not that he won't play well, but it's going to be fun and intriguing to see how that shakes out.
Texas athletes everywhere. They were very impressive in their opener, and then LSU loses on Sunday night in Vegas to Southern Cal. Just kind of looking like an undisciplined football team. Brian Kelly talked about it. I mean, some of the stuff that happened for the personal foul penalties and stuff had to just be maddening for him. Yet another kind of loss for them where he just can't really seem to get his traction in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, they really seemed to have problems early in the season and would get it going a little bit later in the season. Even the year they went to SEC championship game, they got drilled by Tennessee at home early in the first month of the season. So I know it's got to be frustrating to him and all the fans in the Bayou that early season issues continue to be sort of a constant with him there in that program. And to lose out of the gate like that to a team that's potentially a top 25 team, you lose one in the league in the first 5, 6 games of the season, man, you're swimming uphill as far as the playoff. And I think they're better, seem to be better on defense, but still gave up some plays that, that you don't want to give up. I still think they're part of a group of teams. Georgia's clearly the most talented. I really believe that. Neil, after that, there might be 6 teams that on any given Saturday or depending on injuries that are pretty close. Ole Miss is certainly in that group. Bama's in that group. Texas is in that group. I think Missouri's in that group. I would put LSU in that group still. And we'll see if anybody else jumps in there, like an Arkansas or anybody else. But I think there's 5 or 6 teams that can make a real case or has the roster to make a case that maybe they can be a playoff team. And, I did my playoff picks today. I have 5 teams from the SEC in.
Okay.
If 5 may not get in, maybe more like 4. But, boy, I look at Ole Miss and Bama and Texas and Georgia and Tennessee all as playoff teams. And you know what? I still don't think you're right off LSU. Oklahoma, to me, is a little bit of a wild card. We'll see. They've got a hard schedule. That game with Tennessee and Oklahoma, I think that's the 21st of September in Norman, which will be Oklahoma's first SEC game.
Yep, 21st.
I think that's almost a loser leave town game for the loser. I think the loser of that game is going to have a hard time making the playoff. The winner, maybe that sort of sets the tone to make a run for the playoff.
All right, last thing, I'm just kind of curious because I know you get to talk to a lot of these guys and you get some candid answers. Is there a team that we're not talking about, maybe not to make the playoff, but a team that you think could pull off an upset or two that really shake the playoff race out of the SEC that we're not talking about? I mean, we just saw Vanderbilt. You just saw Vanderbilt.
Auburn and Arkansas.
Virginia Tech.
Yeah, that was a great win for Clark Lee. I'm glad you brought that up, man. That was, he completely overhauled that program, Neil. Everything, nutrition, strength and conditioning, new OC. He took over the defensive play calling duties, brought in a bunch of guys. I think they're trying to finally get into this century with the portal NIL. And so they needed to show some type of result early. And they beat a Virginia Tech team that some people are mentioning in the same breath as a team that could be contending for the ACC title. So probably his most important win since he's been there, I would say. Arkansas and Auburn, I think both will factor in to who wins the league. I think Taylor Green, Bobby Petrino connection, Arkansas is going to be a load for some defenses. And I think Auburn, with its receiving core, much better. Of course, you can't tell, like you said, you can't tell a lot when you're playing teams you're so much more superior to. But I do think those teams, maybe both of them, will have wins that this year that we don't necessarily see coming.
Yeah, I mean, look, I covered Hugh for a long time. His offense is really only good if they have good receiver play, and they didn't have it last year. They look to have a lot more talent there at receiver, and I agree with you about Arkansas. I know they were playing Pine Bluff and they're horrible, but you could see that this was Petrino's offense. It's a complete different look than what they've had in previous years, where it was kind of like they were trying to force an offense into KJ Jefferson. This is a much better kind of a fit for what Petrino likes to do. And Sam Pittman, from all indications, has just said, hey, it's your offense. Do it.
Yeah, I give Sam credit. I talked to Sam this summer about that. He says, listen, he said, I understand the narrative. People are going to say, well, Bobby's coming to take your job, or how could Arkansas bring Bobby back after the way he left? He was the best guy. He said he play caller, developer of quarterbacks, getting offenses ready, being difficult to defend. Who's better out there than Bobby Petrino? That was not Petrino's offense last year at A&M. That was still basically Jimbo's offense. And this is, as you pointed out, this is Bobby's offense. And does he have the talent that the upper tier teams, Ole Miss, Georgia? No. I think they will be good, and I think they'll be difficult to defend. So again, a lot of coaches wouldn't do that. Sam needs a good year. I don't think though this is a panic hire at all. I think he did a smart thing by bringing Bobby back in there because they will be, I think, appreciably better on that side of the ball.
Chris, as always, man, thanks so much for the time. Always appreciate it. Great talking to you. The story on Lane Kiffin was absolutely terrific. I look forward to reading your Alabama piece, and thanks for the time.
Thank you. Hey, listen, thanks to Lane, I've switched from Coke to Diet Coke. That was your question that started all that, right? You started that whole thing.
No, wait a minute. Hold up. He started it, and then I just participated in it. I had.
That's true.
He started it.
You asked him when's the last time he's had a Coke.
I did ask him when's the last time you had a Coke, and it was a question that we had talked about on the podcast before because Lane did not look like a guy who was consuming many Cokes.
No, he looks like you, man. He looks like he looks like a pro tennis player. He's got that sort of build, tall, slim, and lean. And he's a pickleball guy, but I caught a flyer, and of course, and after that, the rest of the day. He mentioned about 3 or 4 times. I know you have a hard time believing that he would pick at somebody.
No, I don't have a hard time believing that at all.
But that was a have right there. What do you have? Every brand of Coke the next time? Coke Zero, Diet Coke, Coke. I'll share something with you. He looks at me walking down the hall. He says, as he continues to pick at me, he says, I know you drink Coke. And he says, you think Coke's going to be pissed about that? I'm like, probably, Lane, since they pay you guys tons of money to be a sponsor. Yeah, I don't think they would probably be real happy that you just trashed their product. But hey, that's Lane,
and he survived. He survived it because Coke was pissed. I mean, they were not happy at all, and it was. I think there were some memos certainly around Ole Miss and league wide. I'm guessing based on a couple of things I've heard about. Hey, let's be nice to the people at Coca-Cola. There's a lot of money there, but Lane. As Lane is just able to do, it has this resilience about him where he kind of got through it unscathed, really. I mean,
I'll leave you with this. There's a reason his mom, when he was just a kid, named him Helicopter.
Just everywhere he went, he just stirred it up. Yeah. And then
just stirred it up.
And then
room to room, stirring it up.
And he stayed above it all. All right, Chris, thanks again, man. I appreciate you as always. Good talking to you.
All right, Neil. See you. Take care.
Jake Bolden, part of the team at GoMiddle.com. First of all, Jake, thanks for being with me. And second of all, you guys have been awesome to deal with this week. It's not always that way. I'm not criticizing the Rivals Network because sometimes it's awesome and sometimes there's just not a lot there. And you guys, I mean this seriously, for a group of 5 program to have the kind of coverage you guys have, your subscribers should be quite thankful. It's really good stuff, and I appreciate all the help this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, Neil. And yeah, we're very fortunate with the group that we've put together over the last year and a half. The group has grown tremendously. We've got tons of stuff. So yeah, very, very fortunate to be a part of the Go Middle team.
At rebelgrove.com on, I guess it'll be Wednesday. So by the time you see this, it'll already be published. Check out, we exchanged questions, 6 questions and answers from the folks at Go Middle and myself, kind of previewing Saturday's game between Middle Tennessee and Ole Miss. Again, 3:15, SEC Network, Vaught Hemingway Stadium. We'll talk about the game in a few minutes. But Jake, first of all, I'm kind of curious because Derek Mason, first-year coach at Middle, came in and kind of did the Lane Kiffin thing a little bit, which is, hey, I'm not gonna tiptoe into the waters of the transfer portal. I'm just gonna jump in right off the diving board and see what happens. That's what it looks like anyway from the outside. It looks like he just went, hey, I'm going to try to rebuild this roster sort of as fast as I can. I'm going to pump some adrenaline into it and see what happens. Kind of take me through what you observed from that when he took over.
Yeah, there's a lot of routes a coach can take in today's game. You've got guys like Deion Sanders who just completely annexes an entire roster. And as you mentioned, maybe the more conservative approach where you're just going to head straight for the portal and not mess around too much. When Mason arrived after the firing of Rick Stockstill, there was quite a layover period of time where bowl games are still going on. So a lot of players that were already on roster decided to hit the portal. So he kind of was left at no choice where he's going to have to hit the portal to find those guys. He had a few conversations, was able to pull a few bodies back in, but for the most part, a lot of this roster, especially on the defensive side, is composed mostly of transfer portal pickups, and a lot of the weapons on the offensive side that I'm sure we'll get to at some point about on the receiving side, full of transfer portal pickups. He has a total of 59 brand new guys on roster this year, I think it was top 5 in the country in regards to amount of new roster pickups. So he's got a lot going on for him. As far as the personality type that he is, he's real easy to root for. He's real easy to, in my opinion, from a recruiting perspective, where Rick Stockstill was a very reserved guy, kept a lot of his cards close to his chest, wasn't very outgoing as far as community outreach, or even, that's why I say that the recruiting just seems to become so natural for a guy like Derek Mason. He's able to pick up a lot of those roster spots that he needed. And in our opinion, over at Go Middle, I think he did an adequate job. We haven't quite seen it come to fruition, only being one game. But I think he did an adequate job filling those shoes, especially, like I said, on that defensive front where a lot of guys just hit the portal quickly.
Obviously, the Vanderbilt job is a really hard job. I mean, I think Clark Lee's a terrific coach, and he might just now be finally getting a little hint of traction with the win over Virginia Tech in the opener. Derek had some moments at Vanderbilt, but for the most part, it just really didn't work. In your opinion, how did that experience impact him? What do you see from that in dealing with him there in Murfreesboro?
There's so many parallels you could draw between what Vanderbilt does and then MTSU, where a lot of people look at MTSU as some sort of commuter city for those that work in Nashville. So there's a lot of parallels in the fact that Vanderbilt has never invested a lot of money into their athletic programs in general, let alone the football program, especially when you're comparing Vanderbilt to the likes of the SEC. They're just not there. When you look at MTSU, the same could be said. Prior to Mason's hiring, not much money was invested. They just now are putting forth the money to get facilities upgraded with the new Student Athlete Performance Center. They're just now investing money into actually getting a coach like Derek Mason, where his first year salary was already greater than what was Rick Stockstill in his final season, as well as the amount of allotted money going towards the staff and hiring. So a lot of the money is finally getting put where that said it will go, whereas in reference to your question, at Vanderbilt, he never got that. And I don't think Clark Lee is getting that. Now, I know that they're getting their stadium upgrades, which will help his recruiting. But again, let's face it, that's not enough at Vanderbilt. And to be fair, it probably never will be enough at Vanderbilt. But at MTSU, finally putting forth $66 million in facility upgrades is already helping, as I've mentioned, on the recruiting aspect. But for him, it's like, it's a breath of fresh air, because now the things that he wants, the university is doing. Anything that Coach Mason wants, it would appear he's getting it. So I think from that perspective, drawing on the fact that he's kind of been hushed, or I don't want to say hushed, but he's been limited by the resources the university is willing to give him. Now he's in a situation where he's willing to, or the university is willing to collaborate with the coach. And the way he put it in a preseason interview that we were able to do with him over at the Blue Raider podcast was that he's the CEO of the football program. And a lot of people look at, especially at the G5 level, the football program is the order of, it is the head of the entire athletic department. Excuse me. If the football program is doing well, the athletic department is doing great. And so we need to be able to use those resources explicitly for football, because when that machine is moving, the whole athletic department is grooving. So I think for once he's finally getting the resources that he wants and deserves, and hopefully, we can see that career losing record flip here at the G5 level at MTSU.
So you mentioned G5. Obviously, Middle Tennessee, almost all G5 programs, they don't have the NIL resources that Tennessee has, Ole Miss, Alabama, the SEC schools that sort of surround you there, Kentucky at Middle Tennessee. But what is their kind of lane? What's the lane to success at the G5 level at Middle Tennessee?
Yeah, that's a great question. From the money perspective, it's tough. I know that MTSU, one thing that they really lean heavily on is the Alston money, or the Alston law, as some that don't know, because bigger universities isn't really something that they ever discuss, but it's a $6,000 a semester that you're allowed to give student athletes. So when we talk about our NIL fund or donating to our athletic association, a lot of money is going there. That's one thing that the university is really trying to lean into, is like, you've got to give to these NIL organizations, or at least to the collective, to get athletes enticed by money. Because let's face it, even at the G5 level, kids want some degree of money. And that's an area that Mason over this offseason has preached heavily to the community, is like, this is a way to help these players. Some people don't want to give money directly to the athletic department, but they would love to give money to the kids because they know that, one, they need it, and two, it's a great way to build the program up just from a roster perspective. You're going to be able to get better players just directly from the NIL. But the other angle now, as I mentioned, was the $66 million SAPC, the Student Athlete Performance Center, where upgraded facilities. It's going to put them top notch. And in Conference USA, we have to compete with the likes of Liberty when it comes to facilities, a private institution. This kind of puts us in the top of our ball game when it comes to Conference USA. We're going to have one of the best facilities in Conference USA and G5 for the most part. So that, and then it's all about a culture fit. Mason says all the time he wants blue collar guys. He doesn't really settle for I'm sure he wants the best of the best, but he says all the time he wants guys that fit his culture, that are blue collar guys, much like himself. Pick him up by the bootstraps there in northern Arizona. He wants guys like that. I think that when it comes to searching for local talent, Rick Stockstill was always about Georgia, Florida. Those are the best athletes, absolutely. But has made it his mission, again, talking about picking up these new guys to fill the roster. He's hitting the Middle Tennessee area heavily. I mean, I think on roster he has over 15 guys within the county alone. So that's something that we haven't seen in the 18 years that Rick Stockstill was here. So it's all about, like, to kind of in summary, it's all about the culture fit for a lot of those guys.
I think at the group of 5 level, that's really smart. I had this conversation. We had Bryant Vincent on. He's the coach at ULM. And he was talking about how, obviously, you're not going to go out and win 4-star or even 3-star battles at ULM, right? You're not beating LSU for recruits. You're not beating SEC schools for recruits. And he was like, in the past, I don't think he was trying to cast aspersions, but they went heavy on JUCO and some stuff like that. And he was like, I think what you have to do is you have to get kids from North Louisiana, a lot of kids who, like, there's not a lot. Monroe doesn't have a lot going for it. I'm not making a direct comparison to Murfreesboro, by the way, at all, because obviously Murfreesboro, you've got the Nashville area. There's a lot more growth there, but there's not a lot in Monroe. What do you have? Well, it's a really great place to hunt, to fish, stuff like that. So you find kids that like to hunt and fish. You find kids that you steer into that. Is that the easiest path to winning? Well, of course not. The easiest path to winning is to go out and get a bunch of 4- and 5-star players and go kick everybody's ass, but that's not an option everywhere. And so it's kind of interesting that, I would think, because it's a growing area, Middle Tennessee. You got a lot of big high schools. The SEC schools aren't recruiting all of those guys. There is some talent there that probably gets overlooked, that maybe is late developing, that you could go get. And I mean, that seems like it's not the easiest path in the world, but it seems like one that, and if you get enough of those guys, you get guys that are invested in the program because it's close to home, and you get fans that get invested in the kids because they knew them before they were wearing that uniform.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. In the Middle Tennessee area, Rutherford County, specifically where Murfreesboro is home to a high school state champions in Oakland High School that has won 3 or 4 of the last 6 state championships. I believe the number is 4 of the last 6 state championships. It is littered with talent. The likes of Jacoby Stevens that has gone to LSU. There's a lot of guys, as you say, the top of the cream of the crop are going to go to their SEC schools. But what are you doing with those fringe guys who are only receiving FCS offers? Well, again, with Rick Stockstill, he was recruiting heavily in those Georgia, Florida areas where he's having to compete with those 4, maybe higher 3-star guys that he's losing out on because they're willing to take their opportunity as a backup at Alabama or Georgia or Florida, whatever. But now, just to draw a direct comparison, at this point now in the season, we're only 1 week in. I believe we have over 15 verbal commits. That is unheard of, again, to put the comparison to Rick Stockstill. I think at this point, the most I can ever recall having before kickoff of a season was maybe 5 or 6. So he is hitting those areas that he wants. He's finding the guys that he wants, and he's recruiting them heavily from the get-go, and he wants that verbal commitment. He doesn't want to waste as much time, say, during the season to get those guys. He's willing to put in the effort now, as I say, when he has more free time to actually be face-to-face and less with his recruiting coordinators who are kind of, dink and dunk and emails throughout the year. He's an in your face kind of guy, and it's very easy to recruit the area that you can drive to every day. So I think he's leaned in heavily into that.
All right, we mentioned the game, 3:15 on Saturday. What kind of a team does Middle Tennessee have this year? What kind of the Ole Miss fans that are listening, watching this, looking ahead to Saturday's game? How would you sort of break down the Blue Raiders from what you've seen so far, which is just one game and some practices, obviously?
Yeah, it's really a mixed bag. Going into the game on Saturday, I had really high expectations, and in the first quarter and a half, it looked really promising. Going up 21-0 on a local FCS team, you should boat race, and then you get a safety, and then the wheels just flip over on themselves. So, as far as to answer your question, the team, they're a very gritty team. Obviously, they had to battle back. They trailed with 1:16 left to it. Tennessee Tech had to make a drive. They went a full 75 yards and scored a touchdown to win that game in the final second. So they're a very gritty team, as Mason would describe them. They're a very blue collar, middle made team. So from that perspective, I think you're going to get a team that is very gritty. They understand what's at stake. They understand that they're going to have to play a near perfect game against Ole Miss. And I don't know that they're necessarily trying to go in there wanting to win the game. I think they all want to win the game, but I think the reality is they want to be as respectable as possible. Because seeing what Ole Miss was willing to do to Furman, obviously I don't think there's any holds barred. The reality is, too, in today's game with 12-team playoffs, Ole Miss has got to build a resume, and that includes not only being successful in the SEC, but blowing out teams that they should be blowing out. With a 42-point spread going into Saturday, I would expect that Kiffin is a coach who is very evident. He evidently watches those Vegas spreads. I don't think he's going to shy away from trying to eclipse that 6-touchdown deficit. But I think if you're MTSU, respectfully, their objective is going to be to make it as close as they possibly can, give Ole Miss all they've got, and again get back to that level of respect, because they lost a little bit with Saturday's matchup and having a close game like that.
Yeah, it's a weird spot, right? Because you'll talk to coaches of group of 5 teams in games like this, and you're like, what's the objective? And I guess it's their DNA and their wiring. It's like, well, we're coming to win the game. Well, that's not realistic. 42-point underdogs don't win games. They just don't. So what are you really shooting for? I would think for Derek Mason, it's to build some confidence. It's to be able to look his team in the eye after the game and go, okay, look, that was a top 10 team. That's a team that has playoff aspirations. That's a team that is aspiring to win the SEC. They won 11 games last year. They're a dominant team, and we did some good things against them. I would think that's, even though Mason's a competitive guy that's coached in this league, he's coached against Ole Miss before. It's a different assignment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the main objective is, as an MTSU fan looking ahead on the schedule, you want to come out of this game healthy, because you go into your biggest rivalry week in Game 3 against Western Kentucky. So I would assume, from a coaching perspective, that also kicks off the conference season. So if you have anyone that's even wavering on that availability, you're probably not going to play them on Saturday at Ole Miss. That's pure speculation on my part, but I would think that would be the safe bet, because the WKU game does matter a lot more at the end of the season versus the Ole Miss game. But back to the actual game itself, I think from MTSU's perspective, you want to just control the game as best you can. You want to be able to run the fundamentals well. You just don't want to get steamrolled. I think objectively, come out of the game as healthy as you possibly can, and run an offense that you feel comfortable running. It felt like we were so reserved, like we were trying to hide something this last Saturday. We didn't really throw the ball until the end of the game, when we necessarily had to throw the ball. So I would like to think that they get back into the fundamentals, and the defense are a little banged up after week 1. So hopefully you get some of those depth pieces, some playing time against some top talent that is Ole Miss this Saturday.
What has your perception been of Ole Miss from from where you are? I don't know how much you've watched or haven't watched, just kind of your general feelings about where that program is.
Yeah, I didn't have to watch too awful much in week 1 to get a good feel for what the starters look like. Jackson Dart, I think, going into just an overall perception of Ole Miss, going to go back on that. I mean, they're going to run a Corvette speed offense. I mean, they are blazing fast, and now with this inclusion of the in helmet headsets, they're going to be one of the fastest teams in the country. I think from that perspective, they're tough to beat. And now one of the things that has always snake bitten Lane Kiffin's teams is the defense and the defensive front, and now he went out and got the guys that were necessary to bolster that front seven that's going to make him a formidable front when it comes to stopping the rushing attack. So I think from my perspective, just as anybody from Middle Tennessee looking at Ole Miss, this is a strong team, and it's taken Kiffin. What are we at? Year 4, year 5 now. That
year 5 if you count the COVID year 4 if you don't. I kind of don't, but either way.
But I think you would agree with me that this has got to be the best team that Lane Kiffin's had since his early years at USC.
Yeah, for sure. Probably the most talented team he's had, all in all, because this team's probably a little deeper. He got to USC and the sanctions hit, and all of a sudden they didn't have some of the depth that you needed to have. I think he's rectified that pretty quickly. It's certainly the best Ole Miss team that I've covered in terms of just talent. All right, last couple things. If I told you at the end of the year this was a successful season for Middle Tennessee in year 1 under Derek Mason, what would that look like?
We would be at a minimum 6-6. I think that's kind of the consensus about what would a good season be when you look at the schedule. It would be 6-6, and I think for the most part you're going to have to find a win somewhere here in the early stretch. We have a very tough non-conference schedule for what we typically have. Like I said, Tennessee Tech was the easy opponent, but you've got Ole Miss, Duke, Memphis as the remainder of your non-conference schedule. All those tough. Duke actually looks a lot more beatable than I initially had thought. So if you're able to steal the Duke game, it is at home. It is homecoming. A lot could happen there to get you to the 6-6. The conference slate is really tough. But if I had to look back at the end of the season and said that was a pretty good year, it'd be going 6-6, making a bowl game, stealing one of these non-conference games, whether that's Duke or on the road at Memphis, which Memphis is going to be a tough test, and trying to challenge these contenders in Conference USA. If you could find a way to make Liberty or Western Kentucky games interesting, you have the fortune of having both of those games at home this year. So it falls back on the community creating an actual home field advantage for once in the last decade or so. And I think from that perspective too, if we get fans in the stands and we actually have some excitement moving into next year, we finish on a good note because the end of our schedule is very bad. So if we were able to create some sort of winning momentum late in the year, I would have to say that this is a successful year for Derek Mason.
What's Mason like from an access standpoint? Just kind of an inside baseball that I'm curious about. Is obviously he needs coverage where he is today. Is he pretty wide open for you guys, or is he still pretty buttoned down?
Way more open than most people would probably realize, and he's definitely way more open than the previous coaching staff. I mean, myself as a startup podcast was able to get him 3 times on since he was hired in December, which says a lot about his availability. I don't know again if he was if he was at the SEC level, or if he's the fact that he's trying to win over the community, and I have that level of outreach is why he thought that it would be appealing to come on so many times. But very easy. I know Mark Owens is our SID, who is great again with connecting with the local media. That makes it a lot easier to get him and players on, but he has made it a point that he wants to talk to as many people, shake as many hands, kiss as many babies. And so from that perspective, he is all about being in the face of Murfreesboro and talking to as many people and getting his voice and message out all off season.
Well, Jake, again, I appreciate y'all's help all week long. And for those of you that are traveling to Oxford, have safe travels, and I'll see some of you guys on Saturday.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Neil.
Thanks, Jake. Ben Mintz, Barstool Sports, kind enough to join us here as we continue on with this MPW Digital Extra presented by Rustic Revivals Furniture Company. Ben, how are you?
I'm doing good, and you know what, Neil? I absolutely love being part of this and coming on. We've been doing these weekly segments since I've been hired at Barstool during football season, and so I'm going to take this time to start this and break some news that I hadn't really broke at Barstool, and I'm going to do it for the Rebel fans. I'm in a really good mood because I just signed a 2-year contract extension a couple days ago with Barstool, and we're going to break it here on the Ole Miss Network. So all good things.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
So, yeah, man. So excited. Going to be up in Chicago 2 more years just in time to focus on a great football season. And, yeah, everything's good up here. Obviously, how can you not be excited about Ole Miss and what we saw last week against Furman? And looking forward to hitting I've got the at LSU, Baton Rouge, Georgia, and the Egg Bowl on my calendar. So they'll be seeing me around Oxford this fall.
All right. Let's dive into some college games real quick. I want to make sure we get to the NFL slates. We're just going to sort of hop through the ones that sort of catch my attention, and then I'll let you, if you've got a couple of plays on your part. This Texas-Michigan game, really fascinating. The line has not really moved all week. It's Texas -7 as we tape this on Wednesday afternoon. Am I crazy to really like Texas here?
Well, okay, there's some stuff with this. The only thing that concerns me is the over-under is only 43. Very low over-under. And so the only thing about Michigan is, like, I don't think Texas is a much better team. I think Michigan's offense is a mess, and there's all kinds of weird stuff going on with that program. Harbaugh leaving, the NCAA stuff. Kind of reminded me when Pete Carroll left USC, to be honest, like knowing things were coming. But having said that, with that low over-under, the one thing it's saying is maybe Michigan can make this like a grindy type game, and like if Quinn Ewers doesn't play well, I think Texas is going to win. I do feel like they're a very, very public side here, but I think they're the better team. So I mean, I lean Texas if anyone, but y'all know me. I'm a guy that hates betting road favorites. That's always the thing I preach all the time. And this game's up in Ann Arbor; they're going to be fired up. So I'm probably staying away. I do think Texas wins the game, but they might win ugly and not cover.
Another 11 o'clock game on Saturday. Arkansas goes to Stillwater to play Oklahoma State. I know the Hogs played a bad UAPB team, but they did look different offensively. I'm wondering if they can score enough to cover this number in Stillwater.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on the spread, but I like the over. The over 63. Ollie Gordon running, dude. Whatever Ollie Gordon took this offseason, dear God, did you see him run last week for Oklahoma State? He looks like
he's a beast,
man. I kind of feel like this could be a higher scoring game. Petrino running that offense for Arkansas. They took Taylor Green, the Boise State transfer quarterback who can run. He may not be the best passer. UAPB might be the worst football team that's ever taken the field, though. So I don't want to too overrate that. Oklahoma State, Bowman's Bowman, that quarterback for Oklahoma State's been in college longer than I was. I mean, dude's like 26 years old. He's okay, but I think Ollie Gordon has a big game. I don't have an opinion on the spread, but I lean over. I think Oklahoma State will win, though.
All right, we got Iowa State at Iowa. It's a 3-point game. Iowa, a 3-point home favorite. The over-under, a whopping 35.
Well, hey, Iowa actually scored some touchdowns last week in the second half. My thing with this game, it's a rivalry game, so you never know, but Iowa wins this game every year. I mean, they always win it. And so until Iowa State wins this thing, I mean, I would lean Iowa if anyone. And I do think France getting his son out of offensive coordinator can only help.
I do too. This is where I think there's a media narrative issue that I think is a potential win for bettors. Media get hung up on last year a lot, and in today's college football, last year doesn't mean as much as it used to mean. Iowa cleared up some of its. They got rid of Brian Ferentz. They're more explosive on offense. It's a fun joke. I get it, but I actually think they're a little better here. Iowa State's a good team, so this is a good game. But
for sure. And I also do want to mention because we didn't do the segment week one. I'm on fire right now. I mean, I think I'm like 11-4 plus like 8 units already for the year. I did a ton of research because I feel like college football with the portal and all the changes this year. I put a lot of time in August studying, and I think it's really going to pay off. So I'm feeling like I really am on it.
All right, we got Cal going to Auburn. Hugh Freeze and company giving 13 to the Bears.
I kind of lean Auburn here because remember this game last year? Auburn won 13-10 and one of the ugliest games known to mankind, week 2. And I feel like that's going to have Auburn ready for this one. The fact that they struggled out there, crowd ought to be fired up. I still don't know what to think of Peyton Thorne. I was very surprised Auburn didn't go to the transfer portal to upgrade at quarterback, but they did upgrade everything around.
They tried.
Well, they upgraded everything around him, though. They had a bad O-line. They added their O-line. They added the receivers. They have a good tight end coming back. So they're giving them a chance to succeed. They lost a little bit on defense, but DJ Durkin is a solid defensive coordinator. I think because Auburn struggled at Cal last year, you're going to see a good Auburn effort here. It's my prediction.
All right, someone's going to get the first SEC win of the season. It's either South Carolina or Kentucky as they get league play started 2:30 on ABC. Kentucky's a 10-point home favorite, which is a big number against the Gamecocks.
Kentucky's going to win by 4 to 5 touchdowns. They are going to absolutely slaughter the South Carolina team. Neil, not to share a bad beat story, but I had Old Dominion 18-1 money line for $50 last week to win 900, and they're winning 19-16 with 4 minutes left, and their quarterback fumbles on their own 5-yard line to give the game away. I'm still very mad. Now, I thought that was going to be one of the best calls I've ever had if I'd have hit it. I saw the South Carolina team. They got a freshman quarterback. He can move a little bit. He can't throw. I like Brock Vandergrift, the Kentucky 5-star quarterback they brought in from Georgia.
Me too.
They look dominant against Southern Miss. I think they're going to beat the crap out of South Carolina, and I think South Carolina might be the worst team in the SEC.
Oh wow. Okay, that's a hot take. I'll be looking for that one.
They're bad. They're bad. I watched that Ole Miss. They're bad. They're not good.
All right, Middle Tennessee heads to Ole Miss. It's Rebels coming off of that 76-0 ridiculous game against Furman. I won't get on my soapbox again. Middle Tennessee getting 41.5 as of Wednesday afternoon. This line has gone everywhere from 40.5 to about 42, but we're sitting at 41.5 right now.
Well, last week I actually did a first quarter bet last week. I had Ole Miss by 10.5 over Furman in the first, and I believe it was 24-0 at the end of one. The thing about these Lane Kiffin Ole Miss teams, and this is like spread teams that go up tempo in general, when you play these G5 or FCS teams and they can't match up the line of scrimmage, you just score infinity. I mean, you just score at will because they can't do anything about it. I'm not sure I'm going to lay 42 because that's a lot, but I might look to. I hadn't seen a first half line come out yet. If I could get a first half number under 24, I might take it because I just think Ole Miss, they're going to go up. We're going to go up and down the field again, but 42 is a ton. But I just think Ole Miss. We know how to these Kiffin teams destroy bad teams. I don't see any reason why that's going to be a problem. Could be a hot one on Saturday though, playing mid afternoon. I know that's kind of a little bit irritating to the fans.
Yeah, it could be a little hot, but actually it's below average temperature, so it won't be one of those days because sometimes those 3 o'clock games in September are just absolute scorchers. This one will be hot, but it won't be that bad.
No,
a game
on the Ole Miss note, real quick. I just want to comment on seeing those transfer portal guys. Man, seeing Pegues and Walter Nolan, when you got 2 330-pound guys that are agile like that up front, whew! Man, those guys were popping off the screen. I mean, I know they were playing Furman, but you saw them too. You saw Juice Wells caught that touchdown. Pooh Paul looked really good. Trey Amos looked like I know it was Furman, but he looked like a stud at cornerback. I mean, I know it was Furman, but it's hard not to be excited. That's for sure.
If you're a Tennessee fan, you're certainly excited about Nico at quarterback. He looked phenomenal against Chattanooga after looking pretty damn good against Iowa in the bowl game. They had to Raleigh to play NC State there, and I know you don't like home dogs. They're an 8-point. You don't like road favorites. Tennessee's a road favorite, an 8-point road favorite.
Well, this game's actually in Charlotte at a neutral site, so that doesn't apply.
Okay.
This game's in Charlotte. This game I like the over. This line went from like 4.5 to 8 off Tennessee looking good, and NC State let Western Carolina keep it into the third quarter last week. But I'll tell you what, this is a fascinating quarterback matchup. You mentioned Nico with Tennessee, with Josh Heupel calling plays. Grayson McCall, former Coastal Carolina star, now taking snaps for NC State. He looked good chunking it all over the field. NC State's got a receiver at Concepcion that is a dude. Look out for him. I think this game's going to get buck wild. I think the over's in the low 60s. I'm on the over as long as the weather's not bad. I think this is going to be a wild one.
Yeah, the number 61. Colorado heads to Nebraska. I get tired of the Dion line, but a lot of people pay attention to it. Nebraska, 7.5-point favorite.
I like Nebraska, especially if you can get it at 7. And I'll tell you why. Matt Rule, look at what happened at Temple. Look at what happened at Baylor. Horrible year ones, both places. Big year twos. He actually had a pretty good defense last year. They just literally couldn't get first downs. I thought Dylan Raiola, the 5-star freshman quarterback, looked pretty good. They covered a 27.5-point spread against UTEP. I'm buying Nebraska being an 8-win team this year, and I'm buying them hammering Colorado here. It's a big statement game for them. They got blown out last year, week 2. I think Matt Rule is a much more real football coach than Deion Sanders, and we're about to see that on Saturday.
A lot of people picking Boise State to be the Group of 5 team that makes the 12-team playoff. They get a chance to make a statement in Eugene, a 20-point dog against the Oregon Ducks, who did not look great.
I have a lot of thoughts on this game. So I think this is the rat line of the week. I think Oregon's going to win. I think Oregon's the right side here, and I'll tell you why. Everybody's making a huge deal about Oregon beating Idaho 24-14. I get it. I didn't watch the game, but I was so weirded out by the final score, I went diving on the stats and metrics. Dylan Gabriel, 41 of 49 for 380 yards. Oregon had 2 fourth-down conversions they missed in the red zone. This should have been a blowout, and there's an overreaction to that game being close. Boise did win at Georgia Southern last week, but their defense looked terrible. Georgia Southern scored like almost 40 points. Boise's got a super stud running back that had 5 touchdowns last week, one of the highest-ranked running backs in the country. Oregon has a beast D-line. They're going to stack up the run. They're going to make Boise throw. I think Oregon wins by 4 to 5 touchdowns, and I think Boise is the sucker underdog of the week. That's my take.
That's a hot take. I like that. All right, one more college game, then we're going to get to the NFL slate. I'll get you if you have any other picks. I'll get them from you in a second. Mississippi State heads to Arizona State. The Bulldogs in Jeff Lebby's first road game as head coach are a 6.5-point underdog in Tempe.
Hell, that's good that they're 6.5-point underdogs. They're about to lose by 14-17. Kenny Dillingham, a guy I've always loved. He was the offensive coordinator at Memphis, the offensive coordinator at Oregon before getting the Arizona State job. Always been a huge fan of his play calling. This is year 2 at Arizona State. He was in a rebuild last year. They started slow, but they fought a lot late. They improved. They destroyed Wyoming last week in week 1, like 49-7. And this game's a 9:30 kick out in Tempe. That's a weird trip for Mississippi State. And I mean, I know he looked good last week, but I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. I called Blake Shapen's games in high school in Shreveport when I used to do high school sports radio. I just don't think he's a good quarterback. And when Mississippi State took him, I was like, that's the best they can do. I don't know. Not a fan of his. I like Arizona State here. I think they're going to win pretty handily.
All right, so you got some hot college takes. Any games that I missed that you're big on this week?
I'm really interested to see what happens in Appalachian State at Clemson because App State always fights Power 5 teams. We've seen it for years. They're an 18-point dog. You know, the natural tendency would say, oh, Clemson's in a bounce back if they got smoked by Georgia. But everybody said the same thing about Florida State after what happened against Georgia Tech. We saw what happened with them Monday night. Clemson's offense just does not have a lot of firepower. I don't like Klubnik. They don't really have elite playmakers. I kind of think I'm not saying App State wins, but I think taking the 18 with how much they always fight and they're not scared of big schools, and you know how much this game means to them, I kind of think App State fights here. So kind of looking at the App State plus 18 on the G5 front. And then I got one more for you, Neil, with our North Louisiana ties. We got watch out for what goes down in Malone Stadium in Monroe, Louisiana Saturday night. UAB, 13.5-point favorite against ULM. The reason this game is interesting, Brian Vincent, new ULM coach, his whole staff was the UAB interim coaches when Bill Clark left. They passed on Brian Vincent to hire Trent Dilfer, and I'm friends with General Booty, who's starting for ULM. Yeah. He said the whole offseason has been dedicated to beating UAB. That's all the staff cares about. So watch out for ULM as a 13.5-point home dog and maybe even money line because this game means everything to this coaching staff.
And I don't think UAB's terrific. And some of the UAB guys might be looking ahead to Arkansas next week. There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, well, looking at ULM the last few years, look, I know they're not good, but they fight at home. They've won some games as home dogs. I remember they beat Troy. They beat App State. They've lost a lot of close ones. Yeah, they fight in the spot. They get killed on the road. But they beat Jackson State by a couple of touchdowns in the rain last week. They were real vanilla with General Booty and the play call, and they didn't do too much. But I just think what I've been hearing all summer, how much this game means to this program and coaching staff, sign me up for plus 13.5, and I might take the money line.
Oh, I love it. That'd be awesome. That'd fire me up, man. A ULM win over UAB, I'd be jacked.
Yeah, the General Booty thing's hilarious, man. ULM gave him $50K, and I heard he got $50K in NIL money to go to ULM, dude. Monroe's shelling out some money. Never thought I'd see that.
I didn't know ULM had $50K in NIL.
Neither did I.
Good for them. All right, let's jump into some NFL. NFL gets started Thursday night. It's the Ravens and the Chiefs, big AFC game. The defending Super Bowl champs at home, giving 3 to Baltimore.
All right, this one, I mean, I'm going to give a not very long speech about giving you no pick because it's so hard to tell. What I do know is this. In that AFC Championship game last year, Todd Monken, who was an unbelievable coach at Southern Miss and offensive coordinator at Georgia, the 2 Stetson Bennett titles, and did a spectacular job all year with Lamar Jackson, he lost his mind that Sunday morning. You play a KC team that's not that great against the run, who has an elite pass rush and elite corners, and you're just like, you know what we're going to do in the AFC Championship? We're going to drop Lamar Jackson back in the shotgun every play. I don't know what the hell he was doing. It was the worst play call of the offensive coordinator game, considering the stakes that I've ever seen. So what do they do this offseason? They go get Derrick Henry. And they've had all offseason to realize how bad that game plan was. So my point being, they're going to run the ball in this game. I'm sure of that. As far as the game goes, the Ravens got to be so motivated after losing that AFC Championship. But I always have the old rule. I just don't bet against Patrick Mahomes. So I'm going to sit back. I'm going to watch it. And that's the over-under is like 46.5. Seems about right. I do think Derrick Henry scores a touchdown. And watch out for Xavier Worthy for KC and fantasy. He ran a 4.21. He's a great route runner. They've been trying to replace Tyreek Hill for the last few years. I'm not saying Xavier Worthy anybody's Tyreek Hill, but can he be 50% of Tyreek Hill if he is, that opens up that offense and gives them a big play threat. So, but I don't really have an opinion on the game.
All right, we got a Friday night game in Brazil, I think, whatever. The Packers and the Eagles, really good NFC game. They should have played this one in Philadelphia. It would have been a lot more fun. The Eagles giving 2.5 to the Pack.
Another brutally tough one. So Green Bay, youngest team in NFL history to win a playoff game last year. Average starting player 25. They had a really rough first half, but whatever clicked on Thanksgiving Day in Detroit, Jordan Love was awesome down the stretch. They had a lot of young receivers emerge. They got a lot of momentum. Philly is just so hard to read. You got two new coordinators in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. They collapsed down the stretch. Sirianni got him the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Now maybe there's some heat on him. This one, another one where I'm just giving you a long speech that's brutally tough. But I guess I'd lean Green Bay if I had to make a pick because I believe in Jordan Love and I believe in Matt LaFleur, but I don't have a strong read here.
All right, Sunday games, big line here. Bengals -8, but the Bengals are a team I kind of pointed at making a Super Bowl run. They're playing a bad Patriots team, but 8's a big number.
The thing is, it was 9.5, but now they're saying Jamar Chase might not play over this contract negotiation stuff, and so I think that's the reason it's gone to 8. No matter. I think Burrow's motivated this year. I think Cincinnati's going to be good. And New England, you got Jacoby Brissett out there with Ramondre. They have literally no playmakers. And I think as bad as they were last year, they still had a good defense. And losing Belichick ain't going to hate that. So I think Cincinnati is the team everybody's taking in their survivor pools this week where you have to just do the one winner. And I think Cincinnati wins. I think it's 24-13 or something, not the most entertaining game.
Buffalo at home against the Arizona Cardinals. The Bills giving 6.5.
Something feels ratty about this because you'd think Buffalo would be 8 or 9 here. And the over-under's 48. I kind of like the over. Arizona, they weren't good last year, but they fought down the stretch. They won at Philly Christmas Day. Kyler Murray's healthy. They're adding Marvin Harrison. The problem with the Bills, watch out for their defensive issues. Matt Milano is the captain of their defense. He's out maybe for the year. They lost Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer at safety. I think it's bad for their defense. I lean over here, and I kind of just think this line smells weird. I think Arizona's going to fight just off why is this line under a touchdown. Something seems weird here.
All right, weird game here in terms of – I say it's weird. I think the line should be a little bit bigger. The Dolphins and the Jags in Miami. Miami's a 3.5-point favorite. Why is that line so low? I would have thought it would be more like 5.5, 6.
Yeah, I know. I thought the same thing, but, man, I don't mess with Miami in these home games when they're healthy. They have a great home field advantage. They've got that weird thing where they've got the opposing team sitting in the sun. I don't know how that's legal. How is Miami allowed to be in the shade and the other team just has to be in the sun the whole game? That's so weird. But Miami's healthy coming into this game with Tua and Tyreek and Waddle. And Jacksonville allowed 275 yards passing a game last year. You're playing the wrong team if you got a bad pass defense. So Miami might look a little obvious, but I'm still taking the Dolphins here.
Texans and Colts, AFC South game. Texans a 3-point road favorite in Indy. A lot of people taking Indy as kind of a sneaky surprise playoff team. Where do you stand on this one?
Man, this Anthony Richardson thing's hard to read because I think he's just a terrible passer, and he couldn't throw at Florida. He had threw completed 53% of his passes. I do think he's great for the running game. Look for Jonathan Taylor to have a good year with having a quarterback threat in the running game. But this is a revenge game. Houston beat Indy week 18 last year to get in the playoffs. So Indy's going to be fired up. I feel like Houston's kind of a sucker side here, so I'm kind of Indy or nothing on this game, even though I don't really love Richardson.
Yeah, so far I'm having a hard time finding games I really like picking. Here's one I do kind of like.
I got a few coming. I've got some we hadn't got to yet.
I'm gonna get to one more. Let's see. We'll touch this one right here. This is not one that I'm crazy about, but it's on the list. I like people get mad at me when I don't go over all of these with you, Ben, because they're always looking for the one or two that you like. Vikings giving 1.5 at the Giants. Any thoughts there? That's a dog of a game.
Man, it's a bad game. The only thought I do have is I think Malik Neighbors is going to put on a show in his first game. He's obviously the Giants' only weapon. The Vikings had a bad pass defense last year. He's plus 450 to have 100 yards, and I just think they're going to feed him, and he's going to get 10 to 15 targets. So that's really all I got on this game is look out for him to have a big rookie first game.
Am I crazy to love the Bears? Caleb Williams, the opener. It's in Chicago. Everybody's excited in Chicago. People are optimistic. The Titans are coming to town. Titans did not have the best offseason in the world. The Bears, a 4-point home favorite Sunday at noon.
I think the Bears are fine. I'm in the Chicago thing. I think the crowd's going to be fired up, and I think that this is kind of a celebration game. And I still don't know. Like Levis, he was in as a rookie. He had some good games. He had some bad games. That's standard for a rookie. But I think the DeAndre Hopkins injury really hurts Tennessee because Levis was really leaning on him last year. He's out. They got Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard now, but I think Chicago is going to be fired up. This is like a party situation, new era, and I think they get this done by 7 to 10 points.
Kind of like this one here. I know it's not always the smartest strategy in the world to bet against Pittsburgh, but I sort of like Atlanta in this spot at home, giving 3.5 to the Steelers.
So the thing with Pittsburgh, and it's the same thing year after year, man. When Tomlin's an underdog, you just don't want to mess with them. I mean, they struggle when they're a favorite. The over/under in this game, I believe, is like 42 or 43.
42.
I actually have a pretty strong play on the under here, even though it's in a dome. I know Atlanta's got Kirk Cousins and all these new weapons they're excited about, but it's still week one. You're figuring out your chemistry, and there's no quarterback that's been more of a fitting Steeler to play these crappy 16-13 fourth quarter games than Russell Wilson. I mean, it's a match made in heaven. You see these Tomlin-Pittsburgh games that are always ugly into the fourth. Russell Wilson is born to be quarterback in those games. I mean, you just can't make this up. But I kind of think Cousins struggles a little bit, just like his first game. Pittsburgh's got a good defense, and I think this is one of those ugly Steelers games in the fourth quarter. I'm on the under, and I lead Pittsburgh plus 3.5.
All right, my guy Chase Parham, like you, as a New Orleans Saints fan, he is all completely out on the Saints. He's almost morose about it. He can't even talk about the Saints. Ben, Saints at home to open the season against the Carolina Panthers are giving 4.
Well, I have a very strong opinion on this game. Well, the Saints have won 5 straight season openers. They have to win this game because the next 4 are at Dallas, Philly, at Atlanta, at KC. I mean, they have to win this game. You're looking at a horrendous start if you don't win. But you know what? I'm not that excited about the Saints this year, but there's one thing that ails that, and that's watching Bryce Young play quarterback in the NFL. I didn't like him when they drafted him. He's small. He holds onto the ball too long, and I thought it was crazy. They took him over C.J. Stroud. I know that. I mean, I said it at the time. I promise I'm not lying. And they hired Dave Canales, the Tampa Bay OC, who did a good job with Baker. They bring in Deontay Johnson. That's not enough to fix this team. Their offensive line stinks. He stinks. And my play on this, I mean, I don't think the Saints' offense is good, right? Especially left guard and right tackle are terrible. And Derek Carr can't move. I do like the Clint Kubiak OC hiring, but how much can the offensive coordinator do when you can't block and you have a quarterback that can't move? My point being, the over-under in this game is 41.5, and it should be 35. Every time the Saints and Panthers play, it's the worst series in the NFL. Last year, it was like 17-3 and 16-13 on Monday night. These games always stink. I think the over-under should be 35. It's 41.5 only because it's week one. I'm going 3 to 4 units on under 41.5. And if there's a shootout in the Superdome, then they can just take my money because these games are always – I think we're looking at one of those 17-13 type deals yet again.
Okay. All right, Denver getting 6 at Seattle.
I'm kind of buying the Bo Nix thing a little bit because I just think his skill set fits what Sean Payton likes to do. He's going to get the ball out quick. I know he's a rookie, but he's like 24. And I think that he fits what Sean Payton likes to do with short accuracy. He's just a quarterback playing point guard. And I think 6 is a big number. And Seattle's kind of prone to playing closer games. I don't know if Denver wins, but I think they fight. And I'm kind of buying, the whole Russell Wilson thing is, Wilson leaving Denver. Peyton, I got some sources in with Sean Payton these days, flexing baby. I heard it took 5 practices last year for him to hate Russell Wilson. And so now he's got him out. He's got the guy he wanted in Bo Nix. I think there's going to be a different era around Denver, getting Wilson out of that building and it being Sean's team. And, I'm liking them plus 6. I don't know if they win, but I think they fight. I think they're going to be kind of like frisky 7-10, 8-9, but like a team that covers and is a little better than people think this year.
All right, the Jim Harbaugh era opens with the Chargers against the Raiders at home. Harbaugh and the Chargers, Justin Herbert and everybody giving 3 to Vegas.
This is one, man, I don't think the odds makers have a clue, and they made the home team 3. Over-under's low. Chargers receiving core, no more Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams. Watch out for Lad McConkey. He's in a spot where he, somebody's got to catch the ball for the Chargers. I feel like he could be that kind of slot guy that catches some balls in PPR fantasy. But I'd lean Chargers if anybody here, but I don't have a strong read.
All right. One of my teams that I think is going to be pesky that no one gives credit to is the Cleveland Browns. They're at home against the Dallas Cowboys. Big, kind of a high-profile game. Cleveland giving 2.5 to Dak Prescott and the boys.
This is the third game of the week that's so hard to pick. This, Green Bay, Philly, and Baltimore, KC are brutal. The thing that was most interesting to me about this game is the over-under is only 41.5. And you'd have thought Dallas, Cleveland? Wouldn't it be 46, 47? Doesn't that seem kind of low to you?
Yeah.
So that's interesting to me. And it makes me almost like the under, because y'all know me. I'm always like a conspiracy bettor. And I'm usually pretty good about guessing where lines are. When I'm 3 or 4 points off, there's usually something up. So I kind of think we might be having like a lower scoring, ugly type game here maybe. But God only knows who's going to win it, because who knows what's coming with Deshaun Watson. One thing, Amari Cooper could have a good game. He's playing Dallas, his whole team. He might be fired up for this one.
Washington heads to Tampa. Most people picking the Bucs to win the NFC South. They're a 3.5-point favorite over the Commanders.
I like the Commanders this year just because I'm a Jaden Daniels truther. I think he's about to tear up the NFL. And I really think just the way he developed at LSU, he went from a quarterback that would look at one read and then run. He gets to his 4th, 5th progressions. He's also can still run. And I think he's going to have a really good year. And I kind of like him to have a big game on Sunday. I think Terry McLaurin's going to have a good game. The Commanders' defense, they hired Dan Quinn. They do have Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, the two Bama studs up front. They brought in Bobby Wagner, who still I think is a good captain of the defense. Their secondary sucks. So long story short, I think we might have a higher scoring game here. I like over 44. And look out for Daniels and McLaren in fantasy. Is my thoughts.
All right, then we get the Sunday night game. I think the team everybody's really fascinated in this year is the Detroit Lions. It's sort of their turn. They're the hot team. Everybody there is optimistic about them. Had a deep playoff run a year ago. They open at home against the Rams, 3.5-point favorites.
Man, the Stafford line, this is a rematch of that close playoff game. Stafford back in Detroit, Goff playing his old team. A lot of storylines here. I think the Lions are the better team. I think, Neil, you've seen this. There's some people in life that aren't replaceable, and Aaron Donald's one of them. They drafted the top Florida State linemen first and second round to try to replace him. But, how do you replace, like, the greatest defensive tackle of all time? I don't know how you do it. And the Rams' defense already wasn't very good, even with him playing. So I feel like I'm having a hard time seeing the Rams get a lot of stops. Detroit totally revamped their secondary. They had a good run defense last year, but the pass defense was terrible. So they brought in a first-round corner in Terrion Arnold. They brought over Meek Robertson in the slot and Carlton Davis from Tampa. So will the new look secondary be better? We'll see. I think I still lean over 51. And then one other thing, look out for former Alabama receiver Jamison Williams this year. This is his 3rd year. He came off a torn ACL in the title game his first year. He had the 6-game gambling suspension last year. But he was making some big plays down the stretch in the playoffs. I think they maybe watch out for Detroit to use him a little more this year. I'm going to go over even if it's 51. I think this one gets wild in the dime.
Yeah, 50.5 is the over-under. All right, one last one. We got the Monday night game, and I'm surprised this line is as low as it is. I know there's Aaron Rodgers love, but the Niners looked awfully good last year. They're a 4.5-point home favorite against the Jets.
I have a strong opinion on the under in this game. You got 2 of the top 6 defenses in the NFL. 44 seems high. I do think we'll see what happens with the Rodgers thing and he stay healthy, but just because Rodgers is on the team, they ain't trying to throw it 40 times a game. They're going to try to run the ball with Breece Hall. They're going to try to play defense, and they're going to run play action, and they're going to be careful about keeping Rodgers not getting hit and staying healthy. So I think the Jets are going to look to be playing lower-scoring games, grinding it out. And I know the Niners re-signed Ayuk, and they got Trent Williams back, but it's been a weird offseason off that Super Bowl. And as great as these Shanahan teams are, they're kind of known for starting a little slower and getting hot. So I think we're looking at like a 2017 type game here. I'm not really sure on the spread, but I think under 44 here, pretty strong, pretty big play on it.
Man, great stuff this week. Really appreciate it. We'll come back. We'll do it again next week. We get ready for Ole Miss at Wake Forest as the Rebels hit the road. It's an unfair narrative, but it's a legit narrative at the same time. I think you and I both think this is a really, really good Ole Miss team. But I've seen some people, Ben, that they're already trying to spin this, the media's out. I'm like, no, the media's not out to get them. They're not playing anybody till the end of September, and that kind of hurts you a little bit when, the other teams, Notre Dame went and won a game, right? And USC won a game. When other teams play people and the first part of your schedule's kind of powder puffy, from a credibility standpoint, for lack of a better word, you sort of pay for it a little, but everybody's still giving Ole Miss their respect. I've seen some media people trying to play the no respect card, and I don't even want to give them credibility, but it's just stupid.
Yeah, well, the good news is we got a 12-team playoff now, so who really gives a crap what the media thinks? Because if you win 10 games, you're getting in it. So it's not like when it's a 4-team playoff and all this stuff mattered.
Agreed.
Ole Miss has got a simple situation. You go 10-2 out of the SEC, you go 6-2 in the SEC, you're getting in the playoff, period. End of story. And Ole Miss would have made the playoff if it was 12 teams last year, and it would have made it 3 years ago when Corral went 10-2. So I think you just don't worry about what the media says. I do think, obviously Ole Miss has one of the biggest cream puff wars we've ever seen the first 4 weeks. It's basically, Lane Kiffin can call it rat poison all he wants. We have 4 scrimmages. But so what? If we go 6-2, you're fine. Kentucky could be an interesting test, though, because we'll see what Kentucky does to South Carolina. I like Vandergriff. They got 2 stud receivers. They got a pretty good defense. That Kentucky game could be a fun test on September 29th. Kind of get them going, but I think you're just going to see beatings the next 3 weeks. And the media can say whatever they want. If Ole Miss goes 10-2, they're making the playoffs. So
I agree completely. I guess my thing is just the people that are out trying to make this a storyline. You're trying too hard. You're trying.
The media, man. I get annoyed in the media, and I know people do it for clicks, and we're in the same business. How many people? Everybody's just got to have their top 25 rankings. I just don't care. I don't know. People just do these lists for clicks all the time. I just don't care.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm with you.
But I guess I'm I just do my own thing. And
I'm with you completely. Together. If I had a vote, and I don't have a vote because I no longer work in mainstream media, and there's no bias in mainstream media. I would have
never.
I would have Ole Miss 3rd or 4th, but it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. It doesn't matter. The people that are getting worked up about this in the early first 5 days of September, you're revealing your agenda, in my opinion. But it is what it is.
I'll tell you one thing that is interesting in college football that I don't know if everybody realizes that are fans on here. The way the playoffs are constructed, the 4 Power 4 champions get the 1 through 4 seeds. And so I think that's fascinating to where you're almost in a weird spot where the 5 or 6 seed might be what you want to get a home playoff game, and then you'd play like the ACC or Big 12 champ second round. But it's very interesting to me that, the only SEC team getting the bye is whoever wins it in Atlanta. And so I don't know if everybody realizes that's the rules, and so I'm just kind of sharing.
Yeah, I think people do. I just think it's so new that they haven't really thought it all the way out yet. And it's going to be new for a while, but I agree with you. I'm not sure that the 5 isn't the sweet spot.
Oh, yeah, especially you play the best G5 team. And by the way, the Memphis Tigers this year, watch out. Serious football team. I think they might end up being the best G5 team. They can chunk it. The quarterback's 4th year. I think Memphis could win the American this year.
We'll talk about Memphis next week because they go to Florida State with a chance to just absolutely stick the complete dagger right through, and that would be it. They're done anyway, but that would be – they'd read the last rites on the Seminoles if Memphis went.
Yeah, I hit them, man. I had that I had Boston College plus 860 money line one day. It's pretty sweet.
Oh, that is
it was good. The DJU stands for under. One of the best under quarterbacks that's ever played the game.
All right, Benjamin, I appreciate your time as always. Talk to you next week.
Yep. Thank you for having me as always, Neil. Appreciate it.
That does it for this edition of MPW Digital Extra presented by Rustic Revivals. Again, our thanks to Chris Lowe of ESPN, Jake Bolden of GoMiddle.com, and then Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. We have a full slate of programming coming your way throughout the course of Thursday. Got McCready and Siskey, powered by Rain Total Body Fuel. Got the Butcher versus the Dance Instructor, presented by LB's Meat Market. Pete's Pigskin Preview, presented by Meadowbrook Wealth Advisors of Raymond James. Got a hand raise, guys, tonight on Thursday night. Chase Parham and myself, presented by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. And then, of course, we'll have our post-game show on Saturday night, presented by Realtree. And then we'll be right back with you again on Monday for another full week of programming here on MPW Digital. We'll put all of this video in podcast form as well. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, the follow button. It's free on YouTube. Just hit the button. We got over the 8,000 mark over the weekend. We're shooting for 10,000. That's going to let us be able to bring you even more quality content Let us be able to have a little more optionality as it pertains to our offerings as well. So please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review. Just hit 5 stars, then you can say anything you want about us. But hit 5 stars. That helps us as well. And if you're listening in podcast, hit the like, give us 5 stars. We really would appreciate it very, very much. So again, thanks to all the guests. Thanks to the people at Rustic Revivals, Josh and Ashley, for sponsoring this show. Don't forget the QR code right there on the screen. Check it out. Check out their work on social media. There's beautiful furniture that they have there. They'll deliver within 250 miles of Flowwood as well. So worth checking out. Promo code Rebels10 if you go to their website, rusticrevivalsms.com. Until next time, take care.